Welcome back to another episode of Tech Pro Unicorn Podcast. I am joined by a guest that we got to just tell the story. So this guest, we had previously recorded this episode, and thanks to the hosting software, the internet, and the universe, decided that was going to just be a practice run for us. We literally recorded an hour episode, and the files just got obliterated somewhere in cyberspace. And we were like, you know what? The message, the stuff that we talked about, the book, and my guest, Roy Osing, were so cool that we have to come back together, right? So I expect this episode to just be amazing. Roy is a former president, CMO, entrepreneur, 40 years of experience, successful and unmatched executive leadership in every aspect of business. As a president of a major data and internet company, his leadership and audacious, unheard-of ways took the company from its early stage to $1 billion in annual sales. He's a resolute blogger, keen content marketer, dedicated teacher and mentor to young professionals. As an accomplished business advisor, he's the author of the no-nonsense book series, Be Different or Be Dead. He's devoted to inspiring leaders, entrepreneurs, and organizations to stand apart from the average, boring crowd and achieve their true potential. And that's what really inspired me to want to talk to Roy, right? Was if any of you know me, right, I call myself a unicorn for God's sakes. I don't know how much more different that can be. So when I saw this, I was like, be different or be dead. I was like, yes, that's just it. That's the message. That's what everybody needs. And I had to get Roy. So Roy, thanks for taking the time the first time, which was our practice, and coming back again the second time.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. And Michael, I'm grateful really to have a chance to talk about my stuff with you and your audience. So let's get at her. It's cool. It's stuff to do.
I love it. So Be Different or Be Dead, the audacious, unheard of ways that you took a startup to $1 billion in sales, right? Many startups don't even get out of the gate, right? Or they sure as hell don't get to $1 billion. Or it takes just like a decades. Talk to me a little bit about the book and, kind of what's in the book and some of the content.
Yeah, so the book is really a narrative of the things that I did as a leader of a. When I say startup, it was in its early stages, okay? Because that was at the time when the internet was just starting, the data world was just starting to move, and so I was part of a telecom company at the time that decided that we need to make a big play in the data space. And I was asked to basically take it on. Well, here you have a company that was basically rooted in engineering, rooted in taking orders, rooted in traditional ways, voice services, having to make the jump into a fast-moving data world with tons of competition, etc. And it occurred to me at the time that basically the traditional way of running the business just wasn't going to work. Okay, it literally had to be turned on its head, and so I reasoned that I need to break away. So in a way, the audacious piece is a breakaway piece. I call it from bullshit to breakaway, quite frankly, in a way, just to get people's attention on certain stuff just doesn't work anymore, regardless of how cool it was back then, and we need to move away. And so the book basically is a compendium of the sorts of things simple things, Michael, simple things that we did as a team that captured the hearts and souls and lit fires in people's guts to actually execute a strategy to build a very successful business. And I get goosebumps, man, when I got them right now. When I think about what we were able to achieve from virtually, young stages to actually hit $1 billion in annual sales. I mean, the business now is about 16, 17 billion. So it just kept going. But at the time, I mean, it was a huge achievement. It wasn't just me; it was tons of people who got their fires lit, and we did it together. So the book tries to put that forward, and I hope in a successful way that inspires people to basically try some of these simple things that you won't find in textbooks, Michael. This is not textbook thinking. This is practitioner speaking. This is hard. Get in the trenches, dirty, muddy up your hands, because that's where the results are. That's who I was, and so that's the story I'm telling in the book.
I love so much about that practicality. We were just talking the other day about education, and people go through the traditional education, right? And they get a degree, or they get a master's degree. But that translation from theory to practical execution, right? Or they come out with these cookie cutter ideas that everyone else is doing, and there's no differentiator, and then they get lackluster results, and they don't think outside the box. They don't think differently. They don't understand the operation or understand the business, and then they kind of look back and go, why did I just go through that education process? It ill prepared me to be effective and to transform and to be a change leader and to do things differently.
Yeah, so I've got a really simple way of looking at this stuff. Like, I think education is valuable. It's valuable to establish a platform and basic grounding. Okay, but you can never count on it to be the single determinant of your success. Okay, anywhere. You
Mm.
just can't do it because there's, as you say, there's this huge piece that leverages knowledge into action. Somebody said to me once, they said, gee, you're kind of an out of the box thinker. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm an out of the box doer. And that's the essence of it. The intellect actually does very little in terms of achieving results. Okay, it may help you point you in a certain direction, but the reality is it won't get things done. You need other things. You need other tools. You need to inspire people. You need to light fires. You need to turn them on. You need to grab them and haul them willingly towards an end state that you're all collectively inspired to achieve. And so the education process, in a way, yes, it can get you the essentials to start. And those essentials, by the way, are nothing more than problem solving. I used to tell
Mhm.
MBAs, I don't care about your case studies, right? All you've shown me in 15 years of education, whatever, is that you can solve a problem. Now I don't have to teach you that. I'm going to teach you about the IP internet space. Okay, so let's go there, and I'm going to teach you how to light fires in people. I'm going to teach you to hire for goosebumps. I'm going to teach you to kill dumb rules. I'm going to teach you to cut the crap. I'm going to teach you to implement a let's head west strategy process because that's what's going to make us successful. Why? Because all those things result in execution. If you can't execute it, Michael, and you know this, you don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about something because of its intellectual pristineness, because it's worthless in a business world. It is. And the problem is we teach people that it's going to be the be all and end all. We teach people to color inside the lines. We teach people to try and formularize unformularizable kinds of concepts. Easy for me to say, you know, hell, man, I got a math degree. I've never solved a business problem with a differential equation. Come on, let's get serious here, right? And so the world just simply cannot be predicted, right, with formulas. And yet we teach people that it can. And in a way, that's intellectually dishonest. And I'm really hard on the education process for doing this because I had to undo a lot of that stuff, the natural tendency, right, for people to not want to take risks, to not want to fail, right, to practice leadership in the pure delegation sense. All are interesting concepts, but they never worked for me. And oh, by the way, I got $1 billion in sales. That's the proof point that these other things work.
I
I'm
love
sorry
it.
you got me going, man. You stimulated my
That's
testosterone today. Jesus.
that's awesome. That's awesome. You know what I love is you've been talking about be different or be dead for a while. It's not like, oh, here it is, where he's got a book and now he's going to talk about be different or be dead. There's I'm cyber stalking. For those of you following along at home, if you want to check out what we're talking about, it's be different or be dead.com. And if you click on books, you'll see Roy's books, right? He's been at this for quite a while, trying to get people to think differently, right? To act differently. There's your business survival guide, execute first, plan second, be different, 6 acts of leadership, marketing in the storm, a weekly calendar for leaders, uh, and then his like you just have been on this platform for a while. Like, why is this your platform?
Well, it goes back to what I concluded was needed to be successful in the organization that I was given responsibility to lead. And the concept in terms of the way you articulate it, has evolved in my mind. So, I mean, I didn't suddenly wake up and said, be different or be dead. I woke up and suddenly said, wow, we got to break away from the bullshit. And I mean that in the most respectful way, but I want to get people's attention, okay? Hence the word
Mhm.
bullshit. And it did. And so the basic concept in my head is if you're not different, you're dead or soon will be. And the only issue there is you have to figure out a way to be different in the way people care about. Okay, and so it's not just being different to be contrarian for the sake of being contrarian. It's first of all, do you understand what people care about? What they crave, Michael, not what they need, what they crave, what they covet, what they lust for. Okay, all those highly visceral concepts. Be different in a way that you can play into those. And if you're not, success will have a hard time finding you because there's too many people playing in the space around what people need. I mean, that's marketing 101, right? That's the textbook stuff. Okay. So the whole Be Different platform evolved in I need to be relevant to the customers that I serve. I need to give them what they care about, what they covet, what they crave, and I need to be different from everybody else playing into that space. Now, the interesting thing is there's virtually nobody playing in that space. So it's once you figure out what people crave, I mean, you're in a world where premium pricing is now the reality, not price cutting, not discounting, but premium pricing because there's no competition for when you're in the craving space. Now, most marketing people, they have a hard time with this concept, right? Like, how do you define cravings? Oh, gee, why don't you have a conversation, with people? It's pretty easy to break it down. And I guess this is where the intellectual piece of Roy's head started, was that framing, okay, of what success and being different look like. Like, I know a lot of organizations that are different, but not in a relevant way. And that's death. I mean, I'm the
Mhm.
only one that does something that people don't care about. Whoa. I mean, so you don't want to be there. So I've created this process around Be Different or Be Dead, how to do it in very simple, practical terms. And yeah, I mean, it works. The thing that I find frustrating is you're right. I've been kicking this can for a while. I mean, Be Different or Be Dead, your business survival guide was published in 2009. I mean, that was like 5 years after I left the telecom world, and and the internet space in that world. And maybe I'm not doing a good job trying to communicate it. I think podcasting and having enlightened hosts like yourself to have a conversation will really, really help. But at the end of the day, and I'm not super altruistic, but at the end of the day, what I'd really like to have happen is the nature of the conversation out there change away from benchmarking best practices, because, by the way, that's intellectually dishonest because people will describe that as being innovative and creative. Okay, help me understand why copying somebody is innovative. I mean, it's not. It's crazy. So figuring out a way to
Mhm.
get rid of that, figuring out a way to focus on individuals, nose to nose with a person, as opposed to mass markets where the presumption is that everybody's the same. Well, you and I know no two people are the same. The challenge is to figure it out, to identify what is different and then play into that space. So this has been a live organism for me for a long time. And the thing that I find amazing, because I worried about this with my seventh book, like, is the material still strong? Does it still have a shelf life? And Michael, I'm telling you, what I'm discovering, it is more relevant. It is ringing more bells today than it did when I started writing about this 2 decades ago, literally, or a decade and a half ago. So I find that very, very rewarding to think about. And now the challenge is, my friend, you and I need to make a difference here. You and I need to get this message out. You and I need to convince people that the Be Different world is all about simplicity and resonation with people, okay, in a way that makes sense, and get some humanity back in the organization stream. And let's move forward on this. And let's look back 5 years ago and say, wow, we made a difference. The conversation now isn't about benchmarking. It's how can I be different from best in class? That's where I want to see people talking. How can I be different from best in class?
I
That's what I
love
want
it.
to see happen.
When we do consulting in really large organizations, they always talk to me about, well, what's best practice? What's leading practice? What are the benchmarks? And I'm like, why are you shooting to be, I always challenge them, like, why are we shooting to be average, right? Because if you're shooting to be average, I'm not the consultant for you, right?
Good
I,
for
I
you.
want a green screen stuff. I want a green field. Tell me, it's amazing because when I say, tell me about your customer, the amount of people that generally don't really know their customer. And I'm talking not just like, oh, she's a 35-year-old female, blah, blah, blah. Well, bullshit. What time does she get up? What does she do? Where does
I
she
want to know
consume her
what
information?
does she eat for breakfast? Okay,
Right,
what kind of
right.
wine does she drink? Where does she go for
Yeah,
vacations? Okay,
amen.
what does she really do with the internet? I mean, blah blah, blah, all this kind of stuff. I mean, the reason people don't ask those questions is because there's no theoretical model to describe those, you see? And of
Hmm.
course, we've all been taught that theoretical models are kind of where we need to go. I'm an open format kind of guy, right? I don't like being conformed to a digit code or any other 6 digit encryption and all. Just give it to me wide open. Let me write it down. I'm an analog guy, maybe, but you know what? Let me tell you something. Analog describes feelings a hell of a lot better than digital does. And that's one of the issues I have with artificial intelligence, by the way, which we can talk about at some point. But that's just a lazy person's way of mechanizing inefficiency, as far as I'm concerned, or ineffectiveness. But yeah, and so part of it for me was to build a new process, okay, that allowed me to actually create a strategy incorporating the sorts of things that made a difference to me as a leader, the sort of audacious piece, the looking at cravings, the letting differences define you, not similarities, right? Looking at the execution, not the plan, looking at creating, not benchmarking, all this kind of stuff. And literally, I've done this with clients. I mean, we can nail what I call my strategic game plan in like 2 days, and it's complete with what I call the only statement, which is the ultimate manifestation of defining your competitive advantage, which is so completely different than than the way most people do it these days. And it's been such a highly effective tool, and it's resonating with people. Michael, they love the only, they love it,
That's
which
good.
I'm delighted. Yeah.
It, you know, for people to be bold, right? It comes down to leaders need to lead, and we have, there's some companies where leaders are leading and they're being transformational and they're growing and they're being super successful and it's awesome to watch. Most companies, most leaders are not that, right? They're playing it very safe. They're like, oh, there's a recession. Oh, there's a pandemic. Oh, and they don't see it as an opportunity, right? They see it as a threat, and they're like, oh, we just need to build walls, and we need to stay stable, and it's driving me crazy. I'm like, if you aren't moving and pivoting at this moment in time, you're insane, right? Because this is the time for leaders to lead their companies forward, and to take advantage. How do leaders, right, become audacious leaders? How do leaders find a path to be that change agent?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And my experience is, and I can only answer it in terms of what helped me get to where I got to, and it starts out with being really really unsettled about the way things are. Like if you're not walking on your tiptoes with spider senses, you're not ready actually to lean into a changing momentum stream or discontinuity. For me, and maybe somebody once said to me, "Where did you get your contrarianism?" And I first thing I thought about was my mom. she she
Okay.
she was so strong, and I never, this is one of the thing about doing these shows. I mean, it really gets you thinking about things, and it never occurred to me that my mother played such a strong part of my persona and my DNA. And it was around this unsettled notion. Like I was always been unsettled with the way things were. And I couldn't identify it that way went into business until I started to understand the vulnerabilities that we were facing, and that the bullshit wasn't going to work anymore. We needed to break away. And I want to make one point on the word pivot. I hate the word. I hate the word because it's not strong enough. Pivot to me implies turning on a fulcrum. That's not breakaway. Breakaway is reinventing the fulcrum and then going from there. So let's figure this out, right?
Love
If
it.
you want to be an incremental thinker, okay, pivot on what you got right now. If you want to be a breakaway thinker, you want to be an audacious leader, you need to reinvent the fulcrum. Okay, and that's basically with keeping in mind the sorts of things that we've been talking about. I mean, you really want to get yourself into white space here, right? You
Mm-hmm.
don't want to just kind of move from where you are into sort of slightly different space, right? That's not what we're talking about. I mean, when you're faced with a challenge of creating a new culture out of a voice business, this is not a pivot. This is a complete breaking away from that tradition that people have been successful executing in, that people have had successful careers in, that people have earned lots of money in. And now you're going to ask them to forget that. Yeah, forget that's a strong word, but to move completely away from that. And so I think leaders that eventually end up in this kind of be different space start out with somehow being extremely unsettled, being impatient, being at times aggressive, certainly being assertive, being contrarian with what's going on, and quite frankly, as was in my case at a very young age, I was viewed as a bit arrogant, right? Because of the notions that I had, and the energy that I had, and the drive to put thoughts forward, which was completely different than everybody else. And that issue was with me my entire life. And so if I looked at it again, could I have done it differently? Yeah, probably. Would I change it? No. I mean, at the end of the day, you
Mm-hmm.
are who you are, and you make the best out of what
Mm-hmm.
you got. And I like to think I did. I don't like to think that I created this kind of like breakaway paradigm without the support of a lot of people. In fact, it never would have happened if that weren't the case. Um, but certainly unsettled energy. High pain tolerance, by the way, is another one. I'm absolutely convinced that pain, Michael, is a strategic concept. Now, not too many people talk about it that way, but it is. Why? Because
Mm-hmm.
any good idea, any different idea, requires a lot of pain and tenacity and perseverance to move it forward in a world of inertia and momentum that doesn't serve it. Simple as that. That's not a bad quote, by the way. I'm going to write that one down. I haven't thought about that before, but that's a good one.
I love it. I love it. It's so funny because you think about some of the great leaders, right, that we've seen. Like people thought Elon Musk was a nut job, right? When he had some of his ideas, I mean, they just thought he was crazy, right? And now he's out there, sending people doing moonshots and Mars shots, as he calls them, and he's Steve Jobs. Like he didn't go, oh, what's Bill Gates doing over at Microsoft? He like had his own ideas and just went off on the crazy. He has a great quote about being a different leader, right? Looking for the crazy people because
Here,
those are the
here,
people.
yep. Here's
Yeah.
here's here's to the crazy ones. And I mean, he absolutely right. And the one thing he says is you may think them crazy, but those are the people that will change the world. I mean, the issue we have is we have a narrative out there that is non-acceptance in a lot of cases of these kind of people. And I'm not talking about DNA related differences. I'm talking about the differences people choose to make in terms of the way they behave and what they do. All right.
Hmm.
And a lot of those people are looked upon. I mean, you can't tell me that the owner of the Heart Attack Grill in Las Vegas is normal. The
Yeah.
Heart Attack Grill in Las Vegas serves triple bypass burgers. Okay, that are at least 5,000 calories per burger. Now, why does he do this? It's audacious to say the least. And notwithstanding the fact that somebody may have a problem with the healthiness of the offering, I mean, the guy is successful because he's attracting exactly who he wants to attract. He's attracting those outliers, okay, who are wanting to do things differently, who want to be assumed. I mean, he's got his servers are dressed as nurses in his restaurant. I mean, just insane. It's just, I love it. Not suggesting that that's for everybody, but it's an interesting perspective to have. Now, Steve Jobs clearly wasn't in there. Elon Musk to a lesser degree. I mean, that's a really, really sort of far out thing. I think what we need to do is those people will always be successful because they're on the right hand side of the normal distribution curve, right? What I think we need to do is take the bulk in the middle, okay, of average, mediocre leaders, okay, whose lives exist as promulgated by textbooks, and we need to move them 5 points to the right. That's all. If we can move the average person 5 points and get them to do one or two crazy Roy things, wow. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the shift? Like, the great ones will figure it out. They'll be the great ones. But if we want to make a difference, Michael, you and I, if we want to make a difference today in the quality of leadership and performance of organizations, we need to get the bulk of leaders moving a little bit our way. Moving a little bit. That's all. Starting tomorrow, do one or two things differently, get rid of one or two things that maybe worked yesterday but are irrelevant today, and get them to start feeling comfortable with those notions, because they're not comfortable with them today because they've never been taught to be comfortable with discomfort. And discomfort needs to be comfortable because that's the way of the world. It drives me crazy. Here we talk about, the dynamics of the world we're in and how unpredictable and all this stuff. And you know what? Most leaders pay it lip service, because they don't respond to that by doing anything differently. I mean, one of the reasons I wrote a book called Execute First, Plan Second was because I believe that the most effective planning process is to head slightly west and figure it out by executing the hell out of the strategy, learning from that, and making modifications on the run. And when I talk to frontline people about that, they go, yeah, Roy, absolutely right, because we don't know. We don't know what we don't know. Hence, one of the biggest sources of innovation, Michael, is the statement, I don't know. And yet, look what we've been taught. We've been taught to seek the truth. We've been taught to find the answers. Give me a break. We don't know what that is when we start out. So to be able to know would be that we're this supreme being and we can see in the future. What a bunch of crap that is. I mean, the nice thing about audacious leaders is that you actually, with your people, learn together. And guess what happens? Fires are lit. Execution goes up. Bottom line, performance of the organization and taking care of customers exceeds your wildest expectations. It is really that simple.
I love the focus on customers, right? A lot of times I reverse engineer, right? Folks want to talk to me about their process and this and that, and they start from the top or behind the scenes or the corporate stuff, and I'm like, wait a minute, like let's start with the experience you want the customer to have, right? Not the experience they currently have, not what your competitors are doing. What do you want them to experience, right? And then we can reverse engineer up from that. But let's talk about, the customer experience. A lot of people miss that. They start with the top down, and then the customer gets what the customer gets, which oftentimes is unsatisfactory. And customers are getting smarter and more fed up with crappy experiences. They simply won't tolerate it, right? They just go to your competitor, and you lose business. Focusing on the customer, super important. You talk a lot about this. What are some things folks can really do to improve the customer experience?
Yeah, well, the first thing you have to do is understand that service quality has got two pieces to it. Okay, the first is what I call core service, and then the second piece is the experience. They work together. Like the core service, it defines basically your output, what you basically provide, okay? And it tends to be kind of more product or package or in orientation. So if I'm in the telecom world, my core service could be high-speed internet or defined in some way. If I'm in the retail business, it could be washing machines. Okay, but it's without the core service, you don't have a business. Now, the interesting thing is providing core service is not a customer loyalty issue. It's not a source of loyalty because the customer expects the internet service to work. All right, 24/7, 365. They expect it to work. Like, I don't know too many customers that ever called me up and said, Roy, wow, I'm so impressed the internet works. Doesn't happen, right? But if it's not working, they phone me up and they give me absolute crap, and they may very well leave for a competitor. So in a way, the core service component is actually a dissatisfier as opposed to a satisfier. You understand what I'm saying? And so
Right.
if you want to create memorable, mind-blowing experiences, you have to start with ensuring that you're providing seamless core service. And that's one of the things I do with clients to say, okay, no, I'm not going to go to this. They want to go to the service experience because they think it's sexy and everybody's talking about it. And I say, no, we're not going there, right? Because all you're going to do is put bullshit on top of bullshit. That's all you're going to do. So let's start out. Let's understand what your core service is, and let's make sure you're delivering it pristinely. Now, the second piece is the service experience, and it answers the question, how does the customer feel when they get the core service that you're providing? It's the feeling question that's the experience one. And now we can start talking about, all right, what are the elements, okay, of dazzling customer service? So in my model, okay, so replay that. Service quality, core service plus a dazzling customer experience. And I use dazzling because it has to exceed expectations. It's got to go the 10,000 miles beyond what people are expecting. Now the question is, how do I do that? How do I provide dazzling service? Well, there's a couple of real simple ways, Michael. The first is you better hire people that like human beings and would rather do that as opposed to taking inventory. And I know that there's a lot of businesses out there who put people in customer-facing positions who hate Homo sapiens. And you can tell because you see them in stores, no eye contact. They don't want to help you. And the same kind of attitudinal thing on the phone. And bots are trying to make that better, and it's ridiculous. We could talk about how crazy that is. But the hiring process needs to be completely redone. And I had this crazy idea that said, wow, if that's so important to have people that love people, so look at the logic is pretty simple. If you have employees that love humans, typically they're going to behave the right way when they talk to customers, right? And typically the experience that they create will be warm, caring, empathetic, all the things that other people are trying to teach by books. So I went out in this thing and I said, okay, I'm changing the recruitment strategy. So what I did, and as a president of the company, I participated in hiring people in all over our organization. And it was like 10,000 people. So it was not a small organization that we grew to. And it was pretty intimidating for the people who were being interviewed for the job, because here's the president with a panel of senior executives. And I brought them all with me because for one reason, I wanted them to learn how I wanted them to do this, right? So first question went like this: Michael, do you love humans? And Michael would kind of go, oh, all right, I sense this is a trick question. I'm just not sure where this dude's going. and so I'd follow. I mean, you would say yes. I mean, yes is the right answer, right? And so then I would ask you the next question. I'd say, Michael, tell me a story that would show me how much you love people. And this is the question that separated the intellectual appreciators of the question for the people that really did answer it right and had this people-loving DNA in their biology. So the intellectual person would kind of tell me a story, and it's kind of left me feeling dry like a fish, and I'd just escort them out. But the person that really, really did have this innate desire to serve people, to like people, to trust them, to treat them well, they would tell me a story, Michael, that was just ripping with passion, warmth, right, emotion. And guess what that story did to me? Left me with goosebumps. That was Roy's hiring for goosebumps strategy. It worked, and I would always go with the goosebumps. People would say, Well, yeah, but Roy, I mean, what about their education? All this. Look at. I said, yeah, okay, they got that. They can think. I'm going to teach them the business. What I can't do, Michael, I can't teach them to love humans. I can teach them to smile. I can teach them to grin, but I can't teach them how to feel the right way. And unless you have people dealing in an organization with customers that way, you will never have a memorable customer experience. So that's just one piece. There's about 4 or 5 other elements, but that one for me, it rocked because it was so different. It was so anti-textbook. It got more criticism because of the way I called it and the fact that I did it than anything else. And yet I keep pointing to the billion and say, you know what? I don't know exactly the piece that Goosebumps provided in the billion, but I can tell you, if I didn't have that, it wouldn't be a billion.
I
Because the
love it.
math guys, they
Yeah.
want me to now dissect the billion, right, into determinants, Michael.
Hmm.
And I'd say, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. But I can tell you, and the people, by the way, what did they remember 5 years after that? When I'd be walking through the work environment, I'd spot somebody who I hired. You know what they would say? Roy, wow, nobody's ever done that before. It was pretty intimidating, but I love my job and I love taking care of customers. So thank you for giving me that experience. Come on. Isn't that what audacious leaders should be doing? Isn't that
Yeah.
the response they should be getting? I mean, I think so.
I love it. I had, an opportunity to work for Dignity Health, and their slogan is "Hello, Human Kindness." Um, and I was a recipient of a Human Kindness Award, which is like the only award, right? Throughout our careers, you win all these silly awards, whether it be Employee of the Month, or you might win all kinds of like, ooh, your 5-year pin and all this nonsense. Most of which, oh, okay, yes, thank you very much, and I put it in a box, and I couldn't tell you where that box is. The only award that I keep up and on display is the Hello Human Kindness Award, because that human element, right? That connection with people, if you can figure that out, if you can unlock that as a leader, hell, as a coworker, it is the secret sauce, right? Relationships, human connection, caring for one another, and you're like, oh, Michael's getting all emotional here, but it is the secret sauce to success. And it starts from day one, right? Like making those right hire. I love that. I wrote it all down because I'm currently, because I'm currently hiring positions, and I'm going to bring that in. I love it, right?
Try it.
Like it's
Try it.
such a simple way to just filter that out, right? And don't you want humans around you working at your company as
Well,
peers and such that love the other humans?
well, yeah, it's such a basic concept. In fact, the people that talk about, how businesses these days are lacking humanity, one of the reasons they're lacking humanity is that they're not human being lovers. How can you have humanity when you when you have people that are self-centered, narcissistic, blah 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 blah, and they don't care about humans? And so this was kind of like my way of getting it. But I had one other question that tried to probe how people think of themselves. And at the end of the interview, I would say, okay, let's suppose now you walk out of this interview and you're crossing the street and you get hit by a bus and you get killed. Boom, no more Michael. Done. Okay, tell me 3 things that people will say about you. What will they remember you for? And it's another way to come uh, at this at this external, this sort of other perspective of who you are. And I've had people say, well, they will say that I was extremely organized. They will say that I was extremely intelligent. They would say that I will be remembered because I cared about my coworker. Okay, now so I'm starting to hear words that kind of line up with the answer to the question. Tell me a story about the fact that you love humans. And so I just think we need to do more of that. I can teach somebody the essence of the business. Okay, what I can't teach them is exactly what you and I are talking about. And if people understood the relationship between that and providing memorable customer experiences, they would do more. So come on, guys, let's do some of this stuff. It's easy to do. You don't ask HR. If you're a leader out there, the last thing you want to do is ask HR. You're the leader of business, aren't you? Can you not make decisions? Why don't you make this one? And the next time you're sitting across the desk from somebody, first of all, get up from being across the desk and go sit beside them and ask them the question, do you like humans? And just have that conversation. I tell you what, first of all, they will be absolutely amazed that you even, first of all, sat beside them. And secondly, that you're asking that kind of question, and they will tell other people, and they will tell other people, and maybe that will go viral, Michael. Maybe that will go viral. We need that to go viral.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, if you call HR, right, they're going to give you the standard 10 questions, the standard interview questions. Like I hate it, right? I ask a whole bunch of other questions, during interviews. And one of them is I ask people, are you a gamer? And because we hire a bunch of younger folks just coming out, starting their career, and people look at me kind of like, what? And so a lot of them are like, oh, yeah, I'm a gamer. Okay, are you PC or are you console? Oh, I'm a PC gamer. Oh, when was the last game that you bought that you played all the way through? And they'll be like, oh, man, I bought Red Dead Redemption. I stayed up for 3 days. I didn't sleep. I called in sick to work, and I finished that whole game. I'm like, dude, that's awesome, right? Because that's their overcoming challenges, blasting through obstacles, sacrificing themselves, right? It's just this crazy, like, if you're not a gamer, you probably won't understand. But for me, I'm like, that's my people, right? That's someone who I'm really intrigued with.
Yeah.
And it's okay if they're not a gamer, right? It's one of many other questions. People are like, oh, I can't work for Michael because I'm not a gamer. It's like, no, please don't apply. Because now I'm going to start asking you, do you love human beings? Right now, I'm going to start asking you Royce questions.
Well, it'll be interesting. I always find that the breakaway notion, like you talked earlier about bottoms up versus top down. My way of leading was always, once I nailed in my head what these juxtaposition actions were, going from sameness, differences, going from benchmarking to creating. Once I had that nailed down, then it was easy for me to draw a line of sight between each of those and what was important to me on a day-to-day basis. So it ended up, that model or way of thinking structure defined what I did every day, defined what was important to me, define what I talked about in speeches and what I wrote emails about. I mean, it determines you. It is you. Okay. And I feel sad for people that don't have that, because they're trying to discover stuff. And the main source they have are textbooks.
Mm-hmm.
That's just it. So I love this platform of conversations, because I think it's much more compelling than what I would say is passive learning, like reading and stuff like that. I mean, this is an opportunity to get juices going, to kind of challenge stuff and explore things and articulate in ways that you might otherwise not do on other communications channels. And it really does serve the different ways people learn. And I actually apologize in my newest book, in the introduction. I apologize for some of the repetition that previous readers of my work may actually discover in my 7th book. And the apology I explained was, my intent is to be strategically repetitive. And by that, I mean, try and find a way to kind of come at this stuff different ways, so that it appeals to different ways people learn. And so that was my declaration, that, yeah, you're going to see the only statement. Yeah, you're going to see strategic game planning. Yep, you're going to see killing dumb rules. Yep, you're going to see cutting the crap. Yep, you're going to see goosebumps. Yeah, you're going to see cravings and lusting and all that stuff. It's my stuff. But I'm going to try and kind of slant it a different way, right? So that maybe you find it more compelling now. And that's always the challenge of a teacher, right? Try and figure that out.
I love it. Yeah, repetition, right? What is it? And you got to see the same message 7 times before it registers. I think about, I get to do a lot of mentoring, and I think about young leaders and such. Like, don't you want to be different? Like I just kind of look at it and I go, don't you want to be disruptive? People talk to me all the time, right? I got a blog, I got a podcast. I'm on probably as many podcasts as I record myself, and people always want to talk to me about like the persona of Tech Pro Unicorn, right? And they're like, how do you get away calling yourself a unicorn and actually still, sell into big companies and win $1 million deals? And I'm like, because I'm different, right? I create intrigue, which allows me to have conversations, which allows me to do stuff. Like, don't you want to be different? All these people out there just being normal, right? Like, oh my God, how boring. Like, I would literally, like, I don't know what I'd do, but I'd do something pretty extreme if I was normal. Because it would bore me to tears. Like, I just couldn't do it. I'd be like, no, I'm out of here. I'm leaving. I'm doing something else.
Well, but that's the challenge. Okay, you're on the right side of the distribution curve. Okay, you've got it. That happens to be a world that you're comfortable in. But when we want to make a difference to humanity in a leadership point of view, to society in a leadership point of view, we got to take that big bulge in the middle. And as I said earlier, we got to move them 5 points. Okay, so I'm okay with where people are sitting. If they're sitting in an average position and they recognize that they're in an average position, what I'd like to do is have them say, though, and I would really like to step my game up. I'd like a more successful career, as an example. I'd like to be a more effective leader. How can I do that? Okay, I'm being welcomed in now into a universe where I can start to promulgate some of these notions, and there's going to be some receptivity. Because the truth of the matter is, there's very few people that have this kind of stuff running around inside their bloodstream. There really is, and that's just reality. And so I don't want to be critical of average. I want to be challenging to average. That's a pretty good one too. I should write that one down. God damn it, you're getting some good stuff out of me today.
This is therapy and inspiration for you, right?
I know. And once they ask for help, then okay, then you have them, right? Then you can start move them. And I got to tell you, just as a result of doing these kind of shows for not that long, I've established some incredible conversations with people through email, because I always say to them, look, I got a website, I got a blog, I've got pages, but at the end of the day, I've got email. So if there's anything burning inside you that you would like a perspective on, and only a perspective, I'm not going to give a prescription because I don't have that right, but I can give a perspective based on my experience. Just email me. So I get a lot of conversations in the air at once, just talking about stuff. And it's wonderful because you can feel, even in an email or a text, you can feel a fire.
Mm-hmm.
You can feel it light up, right? And I get a lot of gratification out of that, I must say.
I love it. On the website, I want to wrap up just pointing people kind of back to the website where you can get Roy's book, his current book, or any of his other books. You have a quiz on there, the Be Different or Be Dead quiz. I tell all my guests, like I cyber stalk and crawl their websites while they're on my on the podcast, which is awesome because then I can ask Roy about his quiz. Talk to me about the quiz. What is the quiz, and what do they learn from the quiz?
Well, it's a simple little, what I would call a diagnostic tool for somebody that is interested in this whole Be Different thing. One question could be, well, where do you sit? Where does your organization sit right now? What's going on? So the questions in the Be Different quiz are simply intended to kind of try and quantify, to the extent you can, kind of like your opinions or the status of where either you are in your career with respect to these concepts or the organization is. And then you go through them, and there's questions around planning, marketing, sales, service, blah, blah, blah. And then what the algorithm does kind of give you an average. And it tells you in a bar chart where you rated yourself, okay? And it's a self-rate thing. And all it does is say, well, you rated yourself lower in marketing versus the other one. So maybe that's a place, from the point of view of being different and applying these principles, maybe that's a place where you want to start. So it's a simple little tool like that. And yeah, people use it and I get questions about, well, I ended up, rating myself blah 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 in this, and any ideas? And sure, we just go for that. So I would recommend, absolutely. And thank you for noticing it. That's what it's
Yeah,
there for. Yeah.
very cool. Well, we have covered a bunch. I'm a big fan of the topic, be different or be dead. It's important. I think to people personally, they should embrace that message and become something other than the status quo, right? In whatever aspect you want to interpret that, whether it be in a leader or just in the career that you're in or where you are, right? Be different, get noticed, change the world. Lord knows, right now we need leaders to lead. We need people to be different and to help us find a different future than the path we're currently headed on. And Roy, thanks for the work you've been doing in this. Thanks for coming back to the podcast a second time and recording the episode. It's just been awesome.
My pleasure. I really enjoyed it, and again, I mean, we got a whole piece just on careers. We could do another show. I mean, there's some really rich stuff around career development that you won't find anywhere else.
We like finish up and then it dies. We lost Roy. Roy went offline. We're gonna have to edit this.
There you go.
And there we go. So, at least the world waited until we were done. And then the universe said, they have talked enough. That is it. they must finish now. Roy has to go. And
that's funny. That's funny. No, I said there's, and I'd be happy if at any time you want to explore anything more. I think what I tried to say at the end, there's a huge piece on careers and professional development that people might find interesting. Probably a 30 to 40-minute thing. I mean, there's a lot of content here to try and get done, even in an hour. And I know that people's ability to retain and stay focused and pay attention, I mean, it's challenging. So, yeah, I'll be happy to do it again if you want.
I love it, Roy. Well, thanks again for guesting on the podcast.
You're welcome. And any idea, like, what's your production schedule looking like these days? I imagine it's pretty challenging, huh?
It is. Let me stop the